One of the primary themes in the trial of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán is corruption. In bombshell testimony over the last week of the trial, various former high-ranking members of the Sinaloa cartel and their allies have testified about bribes being taken by the current Mexican president and the last two Mexican presidents. In fact, from the very start of the trial, El Chapo's attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, promised to make the corruption of the Mexican government central to the defense of his client. Jeffrey Lichtman describes El Chapo as just a scapegoat for El Mayo. El Mayo was his partner at the top of the Sinaloa cartel.
Otro de sus hijos, Ismael Zambada Imperial, el Mayito Gordo, aprehendido en Culiacán.
El Mayo is still free. El Chapo was in jail, and his defense is that while he may have been a cog in the machine of the Mexican narco state, he was never in charge, and he is not at the head of the conspiracy. It's El Mayo and the Mexican political structure. Now, while I have no doubt that El Chapo is guilty of enough smuggling of drugs crimes to get life in prison, I also think that his defense is pretty compelling. I've interviewed people such as DEA agent Michael Levine, who had his own case against huge Bolivian, Colombian, and Mexican drug traffickers collapse when Mexican political officials, including the highest levels of the Mexican military, were implicated in the case, and the case was eventually thrown out. Remember 25 years ago when Pablo Escobar was killed in Colombia, did the cocaine business stop? No. It just simply went from the Medellin cartel to the Cali cartel. In fact, since El Chapo's demise, drug availability in the United States has actually increased. Another interesting point is that El Mayo's own son, Vicente Zambada, aka Vicentillo, which I guess roughly translated means pretty boy Vicente, he's one of the chief witnesses against El Chapo. Vicente has pled guilty to orchestrating massive drug shipments, to procuring weapons that were used in the Sinaloa cartel's war against the Beltran-Leyva brothers, which resulted in thousands of casualties. And Vicente cut such a sweet deal that he turned in about $1.5 billion in cash to the U.S. government, and he's going to get about a 10-year sentence or so, which means he's going to be out anytime, perhaps as soon as the trial ends. More on Vicente Zambada in the next chapter of this series on the trials of El Chapo. A document was unsealed in court on Wednesday, January 16th, over the objections of the U.S. government that huge bribes were paid to former Mexican President Felipe Calderón and to a former campaign worker of current President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The source of the bribes in question were not El Chapo Guzmán, but El Mayo. The document that the American government sought to keep sealed, which it said was irrelevant to its case against El Chapo, referred to a bribe paid by El Mayo to an election worker, one of current President López Obrador's highest-ranking campaign officials back in 2006. Spokesman for current Mexican President López Obrador didn't even bother to deny the charge. He simply said it's a charge from a protected witness that is at a trial not even taking place in Mexico. So I guess that means it doesn't matter. It's also a country where big business is even more closely embedded with the government than in America, which is pretty amazing. In fact, Pemex, the state-owned oil company, is the second biggest company in all of Latin America, and the world's on and off richest man, Carlos Slim, oversees a variety of monopolies, including phone service in different parts of the country that wouldn't even be legal in the United States. because they would violate U.S. antitrust law. Just a day before the allegations against the current president came out, a Colombian named Alex Cifuentes, who worked with El Chapo from 2007 to 2013, testified that the prior Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, asked for a $250 million bribe, $250 million, when he was ushered into office. El Chapo turned him down and instead sent $100 million in cash. This would have happened in 2012. The Colombian Alex Cifuentes apparently provided the U.S. government with proof of this allegation in the form of hard drives that contained, I guess, records of the banking transactions that accumulated the $100 million, but I don't think that's going to be allowed to come out in court by the U.S. prosecutors or the judge. El Mayo's own brother, a man nicknamed El Rey, the King, who did testify in the trial, he was going to corroborate that there were bribes paid to the current president when he took the stand, but the judge blocked that, and he testified about other corruption that he participated in and knew about. El Chapo's attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, accused the prosecutors of being desperate to protect the Mexican government. Lichtman then laughed aloud when a reporter asked him if his defense was single-handedly destroying relations with the Mexican government. I guess that reporter doesn't know about Donald Trump and his wall. The people of Mexico don't seem to be too worked up about the allegations that their last three presidents were all getting hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel, maybe because most of the Mexican population survives on $2 a day in income and have their own problems. Or maybe they're just used to corruption. The businessmen of Mexico, the powers that be, are so totally integrated with the government, they certainly can't support any corruption allegations. And that's what I see the Sinaloa cartel as during its heyday. It was the state-sponsored monopoly on drug dealing. The presidents of Mexico chose which cartel to ally themselves with, which was Sinaloa, and they worked with the Sinaloa cartel, not against them. It's no coincidence, I'm sure, that violence in Mexico has now surged again to record levels, surpassing that even of the last drug war, now that El Chapo is in custody. The question now is, will the Mexican government partner with some new El Chapo? Perhaps El Mayo is that partner, while El Chapo is made out to be the fall guy. We in America get to think our government has done something about drugs crossing our border and destroying our streets and population, even though more and more drugs are flowing and the violence in Mexico has increased. So what really is the point of all of this? It seems like just an elaborate spectacle to me, and just another chapter in the ongoing saga of the corruption of the Mexican government and the U.S. government's complicity in covering it up and facilitating it. Two of the key witnesses that have testified so far are the Flores twins, the twin brothers from Chicago who sold so much cocaine and heroin that they would meet personally with El Chapo and his partner El Mayo, El Mayo's son Vicente Zambada, who's also going to be a star, or who was a star witness in the trial. And the Flores twins actually lived down in Mexico for a while, and they would meet personally with the cartel bosses. They were sending billions of dollars a year from their Chicago hub, and they are two of the absolute key witnesses, and they really started the case against El Chapo. Obviously, the U.S. government knew who El Chapo was, but they needed specific instances, and the Flores brothers are the first ones who got him on the phone discussing orders of heroin and cocaine. The first time Pedro Flores met El Chapo, he landed in a small airstrip somewhere in the hinterlands of Sinaloa, and a driver picked him up to drive him to meet El Jefe, El Chapo. And on the ride, he begins to get nervous as they approach El Chapo. There's a man chained naked on the side of the road who had done something wrong. Now, whether that guy was put out there as a warning or he just happened to see him, who knows? But entering into the land of El Chapo sounds a lot like entering into hell. When Pedro Flores finally got to meet Guzman, El Chapo's first comment was a joke. He pointed at Pedro Flores, who was wearing shorts, and asked him, "Where are the rest of your pants?" After that, they got down to business.